So thanks so much for joining us. We know that this is a stressful time for many of you, and there's a lot going on. So we really appreciate you making the time today to join us. I really hope you find today useful. We do have some kind of interactive activities. The point of today, if we had been in Thompson as we originally planned, was really for us to meet you, you to meet us, you folks to get a better understanding of what this project is all about, and for us to meet you and really hear your feedback and make sure that the assessment that we end up doing makes sense and reflects what you're experiencing in your communities. So to get started, we are from Intergroup Consultants. We are a consulting firm in Winnipeg. We have a pretty multidisciplinary team here. We have a whole archaeology section who works extensively in northern Manitoba, northwestern Ontario. We have a whole economics section, and then we have folks like us who do socioeconomic impact assessments for like big projects. Curtis and I both have experience in, like Curtis is a wildfire guy. I have done a lot of flood research. So we have banded together to do some climate strategy and adaptation work. We also do a lot of engagement and facilitation, land use planning, that kind of thing. So that's where we're coming from. We are working with MKO. However, of course, they are busy doing evacuations and other really important things, but I wanted to just briefly let you know who's all on the project team. So from MKO, there's Ashley Desrosiers. She is the program manager for MKO's emergency management program. You've probably met with her or spoken with her. She's super great, but also super busy, which is why she's not here. Caitlin Brightnose and Yanel Tate are regional emergency management coordinators. I know that Caitlin has a lot of experience. She's from Tuktowagan and has experience with helping with evacuations there. So they are our counterparts. And then on the intergroup side, we have Amber. She's a principal and she's an archaeologist. So she's worked in the north for 20 plus years doing archaeology work. We have Elvira and Graham. They are both working on the desktop research that informs some of our understanding of the unique hazards and vulnerabilities in your region. Myself, I'm Alex. I have been doing the logistics for our field trips, so you have received emails from me. Perhaps we've spoken on the phone. You will hear more from me. My background is in landscape architecture and climate resilience and land use planning. And then my co-presenter, Curtis, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, my name is Curtis Ulrich. As Alex said, my background is in wildfire. So a little bit on that. Born in Snow Lake, evacuated in '88. And then I spent 8 years as a wildland firefighter, fighting fires all across Manitoba, all across Canada, and even a little bit in the United States. After I had enough of wet feet, I decided to go to get my master's degree, and so I went to the University of Manitoba and studied wildfire at the Natural Resource Institute there. And as I was completing my degree, the Fort McMurray wildfire happened, and I decided to start a business that would help people and communities adapt, prepare, and build resilience around wildfire. So I ran my own company doing that for 5 years and decided I wanted to move to a bigger firm and joined Intergroup. So I've been here for almost 2 years now. And while here, I've been working with the team that Alex has introduced to build out our emergency management, disaster management, resilience branch. So this is some of the first work that we've been doing at IG around emergency management and disaster management, although we all have experience in it. And it's really exciting work to be working with MKO and all of the communities that MKO represents. I've been to quite a few of them through my previous work. Some of them, though, I haven't been to. And it's been really interesting learning about these communities. And I think that, as you probably all know, and as I had a pretty good feeling, wildfires are pretty high on the list in terms of hazards. But there are some other ones out there, and so we're really excited to share with you what we've learned, and to learn from you. Alex will describe more later, but we bring a certain level of expertise in terms of identifying hazards. But the real experts are those who live in the communities and have experienced the hazards that exist there. And so a big part of why you're all here today is to teach us, tell us what we need to know and what we need to focus on so that the work we're doing is accurate and representative of your experiences. So thanks for joining us today. And I'll be jumping in later with more presentations.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so yes, online is not ideal, but here we are, and we really would like to get to know you. So if you could help us with what's your name, which nation are you here representing? I mean, we obviously know this because we have your registration, but for the other folks on the call, and if you could give us a bit of background on what your role is in emergency management within your nation, kind of what are your responsibilities, perhaps give us an idea of what the team is like that you're working with. And then just on a more personal note, like how would your friends and family describe you? My friends and family would probably describe me as crafty, nerdy, and a bit silly. So it's just nice to have a bit of a personal element as much as we can when we're not in person. So could we start with Dave?
And if you can share your screen, we'd love to see you too.
Yeah, see your face.
Sorry. Hey guys. Name is David Trout. I'm from Shamadoa First Nation. Well, originally from God's Lake Narrows, but moved here. Role in emergency management. My role is, well, right now I'm a public health worker. I moved away from the health director position. My role in emergency management. Well, right now I work with TB and STBBI, so I work with a public health nurse constantly. What did your friends, family describe you? Well, people say I work too much, so I'm constantly constantly hard at work. So, yeah. Other than that, yeah, I'm very outgoing and open, I guess. So, other than that's all I can say.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Dave. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Dave.
Nice meeting you guys.
And we look forward to seeing you in the summer. Trudy?
Hey, sorry, I'm all over the place here right now.
No worries.
I'm the director for policing and community safety. I was at one time a volunteer firefighter with the community. So I'm in a whole new capacity within the past couple of years and developing a more promising fire department and response plan to community fires, working along with our emergency measures team. That's also with made up of various resources and personnel coming from our leadership.
And Trudy, are you in Norrie House?
Yes, I'm in Norrie House.
Okay. Yeah, and Trudy, you can't get out of it. How would your friends and family describe you?
I guess they would describe me as being all over the place. I spent 20 some years in recreation, volunteer. I do have a history of on call, what do you call it, band constable days, and came into emergency management with under facilities. And I am a project manager by experience and by education. I am also a life skills coach, practice EMR. Yeah, I guess my family would tell me that I spend too much time at work and focus at work, and I'm all about work and not about home, and which is fine. I love it. Thanks.
Well, that's good. Thanks for sharing. Craig?
Good morning. Yeah, my name is Craig Saunders. I'm with the York Factory First Nation located in York Landing, Manitoba, up in northern Manitoba. My day-to-day role is Director of Operations for the nation, but I've also taken on the role as Emergency Response Team Lead. I have taken the Incident Command System 1, 2, and 300 with MKO previously. I believe 300 was the one I was with Trudy with in Thompson. Yeah, so it's just a matter of it's something that's always been ever since I was a kid, looking at public safety and all that. Now that I'm in a role where I can actually do something, we just want to do this properly. So this is a perfect complement to what the community wants to do and where we want to be. And how would my friends and family describe me? I could care less. So let's move on. I do what I do. I don't care what they think. So yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. Roger?
I'm not sure Roger got their mic working.
Okay, I will keep motoring along here. So before I get into the presentation, I just wanted to show you the website in case you hadn't seen it yet. So we made a website for this forum conference just to kind of have some of the details more readily accessible for you folks. We do have a password on it, just, I don't know, to keep it with MKO. So the password is June 2025, capital J, UNE 2025. To say you're not a robot. And then this is the website. So just goes through today's agenda, a little bit about the project team, and we've got the links here. So if you need to get a hold of us, Curtis and my email here, the MKO emails, website, this phone number is for Intergroup. And then the links here for the workbooks that we'll be working through today, so the morning and the afternoon. When you click on it, it will probably say request access. So if you can just click that for me, the email will come straight to me and I can give you access to that. And then we also have a website here that we set up, I guess on the same day the state of the emergency, the provincial state of emergency was declared. So I know that the province now finally has their own dashboard, but if you're ever looking for updates on wildfires, evacuations, resources for evacuees, we have this all in one place. So we've got websites, or sorry, maps that you can check out, and evacuation alerts. Some of the resources like this, we also have reception sites, evacuation centers, donation centers. So yeah, if you need anything else, you can always check out this website. And then in the top corner here, if you're looking for any more information from the slides that we've gone over, feel free to refer back to this. We've got some definitions and then initial findings, which we will look at in this afternoon session. So let's hop back into our slideshow here.
I see that Ross's mic is unmuted. You want to just see if he's...
Oh, Roger, are you able to speak with us? We're having audio issues still.
Feel free to interrupt at any time, Roger, if you get that mic working.
Okay, so the point of this morning's presentation is really to give you a better idea of what this all hazards and risk assessment project is, why we're doing it, and what you can expect over the next few months from us. So this morning we're going to talk about the objectives of the project, the timeline, some of the definitions just for these words that we're going to be using over and over again, and what methods are used in the project. So our project objectives. We will be conducting community hazard and risk assessments, and that's when we are coming to your communities. The plan is July. We recognize that that is very likely to change just with the changing weather conditions. So if those details change, obviously you'll be the first to know. But we'll be conducting those in community hazard and risk assessments, both on the ground and back here in Winnipeg on the computer. We will be identifying and prioritizing potential risks, and we'll be doing that with your help. Part of that is also uncovering the infrastructure and capacity vulnerabilities, and that is certainly when we need your help, because a lot of this background research is not community specific. It might be regional specific, it might be Manitoba in general. And so that's when we really need your help and your feedback on what you're seeing as the vulnerabilities. The kind of end result of this is to create an emergency management infrastructure inventory database. And what all of those words basically mean is that it will likely be some type of website where, like that wildfire website I just showed you, there'll be a map. There'll be layers that you can turn on and off, and it'll be things like infrastructure, vulnerabilities, risks, and we really want you to have all of the information that we've worked away at. We want you to have access to that and to be able to use it when you're doing your emergency planning. And the end result for MKO, they obviously want all the communities to be able to develop these mitigation and preparedness strategies, but MKO is really hoping that this information, they can use this to advocate for more funding, for more resources, and really show that there is a need there. So yeah, so there's mainly two project objectives: helping you guys on the ground and being able to do what you need to do, and MKO going forward and trying to get more funding and more resources. So the timeline for this, we started early this winter. We got our team together, we started reviewing the literature. Currently, we have been doing this desktop assessment, so finding as much information out there as we can and starting to develop risk profiles for the communities and for the region as a whole. Pardon me. We've allocated this summer to do our in-community visits, so the hazard, risk, and vulnerability assessment. We have, as I mentioned, kept that intentionally flexible, knowing that there are 26 communities to go to, which is a lot, and that there are always going to be things that come up, whether it's fires and evacuations, or a death in the community, or people are out of town on a culture camp. We're trying to be as flexible as possible and get to as many places as possible during that time. In the fall, we'll move into our analysis phase, and then we'll be creating the reports for MKO at the end of the year and disseminating that information in the form of that website and perhaps a public-facing report. So some of these definitions, I mean, I think we throw around the terms, hazard, risk, vulnerability a lot, but they do have differences. And I just wanted to touch on some of these key definitions just so that we're all using the same words for the same thing. So a hazard is the source of the potential damage or harm. So perhaps that is, a flooding river. A risk is the combination of exposure to the hazard, likelihood that it will occur, and the potential consequences or impact of that hazard. And I'm going to go more into that in just a little bit. Vulnerability is, people, property, environments that are particularly exposed to the adverse impacts. So that would be like a house that's built right next to a river that regularly floods. Well, that house is more vulnerable to flooding then. The all hazards and risk assessment is really designed to identify, analyze, and prioritize the full range of potential threats. So we are taking into account the vulnerabilities associated with those threats, potential consequences of those threats, and really at the end of the day, we want to figure out how to mitigate some of those risks. And then capacity is the ability to prepare for emergencies and maintain operations. So if you have a big car crash on the highway and your firefighters and your police are out there, but then a fire starts in town, do you have capacity to cover both of those things, to maintain operations when there's a hazardous event occurring? Infrastructure is the basic facilities and systems that serve a nation or region. And then mitigation is this part that we're really wanting to look at later in our assessment of how to reduce the severity of some of these vulnerabilities and risks and hazardous events.
Does anyone have any questions about those definitions?
Okay, I'll move into hazards and risks. So this is a very simplified version of the calculation we're doing in the back office here. So both mosquitoes and bears are hazards. However, the risk of a mosquito bite is not the same as the risk of a bear attack. So here's kind of how we go through our calculations. So we have our hazards on the far left here. And then we look at exposure. So indoors, the potential exposure to a mosquito bite is higher than a bear attack. You're more likely to let a mosquito in when you're coming inside than a bear, right? The likelihood of a mosquito bite is also higher than a bear attack. Pretty much all of us will get a mosquito bite this summer, but not all of us will be bitten by a bear. But the consequence, so the result of a mosquito bite, unless you're allergic, is usually not as serious or life-threatening as compared to a bear attack. So when we look at the exposure, likelihood, and consequence for these two hazards, we can do our risk calculation. So we've got a medium exposure, a high likelihood, but a low consequence. So that gives us a medium risk of a mosquito bite. The bear attack, low exposure, low likelihood, yes, a high consequence, but that still gives us a low risk of that hazard occurring. So this is, again, a very basic version of what we're doing with our all hazards and risk assessment. So we've got the community here, and you can see that there's quite a few little mosquitoes floating around, and there's one bear. And what we're going to do is survey and assess, A, the MKO region as a whole, but B, all of the communities individually. And so we're trying to determine the hazards and the risks that are present. So we've got our hazard, mosquitoes. We've got our exposure, medium, a high likelihood. So for us, high is more than once a year, probably several times a year. The consequence is low, and we've got our medium risk rating. Then we look at the vulnerabilities. So who is most vulnerable to a mosquito bite? Well, probably folks who have poor shelter or who are unhoused, and maybe people who have poor ventilation systems. So I don't have air conditioning in my house, so I always have the windows open. That makes me more vulnerable to a mosquito bite. And then what can we do to mitigate it? Well, you can empty standing water, you can improve your ventilation system. So it's that kind of checklist that we're going through when we're reviewing all of the hazards in community.
So I'm going to take over here, but just to sort of put a cap on what Alex was saying, we are not actually looking at mosquitoes and bears. That's just a fun example. It just describes how we're running our process. The actual findings from our research are what we'll show in our next presentation. That being said, mosquitoes and bears are definitely, real things that everyone in Manitoba has to deal with. So I'm going to go now over the methods that we're following as we're conducting this all hazard and risk assessment. We've basically broken our process into 5 phases. Our first phase is confirming our approach, building our team, and collecting and reviewing relevant literature. Our second phase is doing a desktop hazard and risk assessment. So that means we're doing it here in our office in Winnipeg, mostly, on our computers. Sometimes our information might come from calling people and that sort of thing. Phase 3 is when we actually start getting out into the field. This is where we start visiting communities and collecting data from the local experts like yourselves. Phase 4 is analysis, and phase 5 is reporting and regional dissemination. So I'm going to go a little bit more into these steps and where we're at in them. So, phase 1, confirming the approach. This is currently underway. We've basically finalized what our work plan and approach is. We've had to adapt some things based on the current wildfire situation. We have our project team. We've been collecting and reviewing literature, although some of that is outstanding. One challenge we've found is being able to find emergency management plans that are specific to the MKO communities, and this is where we're really hoping to get some of your help. And we've been developing key person questionnaires. We're going to be running through some of those with you today. We'll be going through them when we visit your communities, and then we'll also be talking with subject matter experts. Phase 2, we're also currently underway with this. So as we've collected all this background data, literature, maps, we've been identifying hazards. So for instance, we've scanned news articles for all the communities of MKO. And we've looked for keywords in those articles like wildfire. And we've also looked at maps of where wildfires have occurred. And we've looked at where hazardous wildfire fuels are. And so we've been able to identify the hazards that each of the communities are potentially exposed to. We've then gone further and to understand community risk and resilience. So we've looked at the hazard and we've tried to look at what is the likelihood of those hazards? How often do they happen? And what are the consequences of those hazards? Some of that information we've been able to find, and again, like with the background literature, some of this information we're going to build out as we talk with yourselves and visit the communities. That all being said, we've been able to build some initial risk profiles, both for the MKO region generally, looking at what the hazards are for all the MKO communities, and we've been able to start building profiles for each community. What is Manto Sipi's, what are the hazards that apply there? How likely are they? What are the consequences that have been experienced? And by knowing that information, we've also been able to start building some initial risk reduction strategies. We're still pretty preliminary. It's an early start on looking at risk reduction strategies. And these are things that we're going to sort of keep developing as we go. Phase 3. This is the community outreach field data collection. Part of it's underway in that we've started planning our trips to communities. Like Alex said, we would like to visit in July, but we're not sure that's going to be possible given the wildfire situation. And we've been planning this conference. We were really hoping to hold this in Thompson in person. We were hoping for more people, but given the wildfire situation, this is where we're at. But we really want to learn some things from you today. And our plan is to record this conference that we're having and share it with all those communities that weren't able to make it. And we're also going to share our workbooks, our surveys, so that anyone who couldn't make it can still see what we talked about and still fill in the forms so that we can gather this information. So phase 4, this is the, what was phase 4 again? It was the analysis. So the analysis component, we've done a little bit in terms of the desktop assessment and initial risk profiles, but it's not fully underway because we don't have that community-based data. We couldn't complete this project without going to communities because we don't have an accurate picture of what each community's risk is without hearing from them, without hearing from yourselves. So once we've been able to do our field visits and talk with anyone, then we'll be able to complete these profiles, look at what the strategies should be, and even more importantly, develop this infrastructure inventory and gap analysis. This is something we really can't do without visiting communities, just because there's not really any information in reports or online on what's the infrastructure, what are the gaps in infrastructure. And then phase 5, obviously this isn't started because this is writing the report and sending out the information. As Alex said, the plan is to put all this information into a really accessible format, ideally a website with maps, so that it doesn't just live in somebody's office as a paper report. We want this to be something that's accessible to both MKO and the MKO communities so that it can be used as a tool to help with emergency management planning and to keep track of what's being done in communities.
Okay, so that is our presentation for the morning.
While we wait, does anyone want to share what their experiences have been like during this most recent wildfire collapse? Things that you've been thinking about, concerns that you've had?
I think for the this exercise with the evacuations and stuff, like I mentioned earlier, I took the incident command training, and we have no formal structure here, but just taking that incident command training, I'm realizing that I can see where everybody locally fits in that system. So we do have it. It's just a matter of documenting it. And also with the wildfires, one thing that I was actually looking into last year was we had one company down south look for fire suppression equipment on quads, on side by sides, because we have a fire truck, but that only helps if a fire's near the road. So we need additional equipment, and we're also including drone footage. We have one of our operators that's he's taking the online training with Transport Canada, but we're still seeing that's causing some issues because we've had the government and more recently the RCMP reach out to us because we've been using the drone just to check progress update on our fire line and just to see if we could see any smoke from the community. So just with this, but we have just from that little thing going there too, we have somebody we can reach out to and touch base with when we're gonna send the drone up. So it's just a lot going on. Finding that that the incident command system and the Red Cross are two different entities. So I know that especially our nursing station here, they have a lot of mandatory training for health. And I find that overlooking their binder, that's more of the local stuff instead of the coordination that the incident command system allows. Yeah, so it's been really beneficial the last few months I've been taking this training. So we're slowly getting on board here.
It's good to hear. Okay, great. I think we have everyone then.
Okay, so we are going to move into the morning workbook. So how are things in Norway House right now?
Good. They're still issuing their they issued out purchase orders for every household from $100 an adult, $50 a child from the food insecurity stuff I was talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, and then they're doing the fire break. I think Highway 373 to Highway 374 to cross Whiskey Jack Junction. So they may close the road Thursday, Friday, depending on the wind.
Okay.
But yeah, other than that, the community is good.
Good.
How much rain did you get up in Norway House?
Not a lot of rain. Like I wish it was heavy because
Yeah.
that would be the best, right?
I know we got the
Um,
heavy rain down here when you needed it up there.
Yeah, I was actually down there when that happened. So
It
it was
has
good.
the smoke died down quite a bit though?
Yeah, quite a bit. Day to day though, right? And it was pretty smoky the other day here is what I was shared. And I see it out far at a distance, towards Cross Lake.
Okay, I'm just gonna open up our website. So we're in the afternoon now. Going to run through now some updates on the project, mostly our findings. Then we're going to run through the second part of the workbook, have a group discussion, and then finish up. Okay, I'm just going to share this. So, welcome to the second half of the forum. In this section, I'm just going to go over some of the preliminary hazards that we've identified for the MKO region. We're going to look at the scores for some of the top hazards that we identified. We'll talk a little bit about vulnerabilities, risk drivers, and some risk reduction strategies, some thoughts on risk reduction strategies. Yeah, Trudy, we can email you those workbooks for sure. And if you do end up filling them out on paper, feel free to add attachments if you need more space. The more information you provide us, the better. So what we have here is the scores from our hazard research. So on the left-hand side here, you can see the likelihood going from low to high, low being rare, high being almost certain. And on the bottom, you can see consequence going from low to high. So what this chart shows, maybe I can annotate it. There we go. There we go. Thanks. So what we can show is that in this bottom left-hand corner are the low likelihood and low consequence hazards. So those are the things that are least likely to happen and would have the least levels of consequences. Now this consequence score it's pretty, there's a lot that goes into it. We look at a lot of different factors that go into consequence. And once we've had a chance to look at this, we're going to be interested in hearing from you whether these make sense, because this is based on desktop research, and your lived experience might be different from what our assumptions and findings might be. So some of these hazards might end up moving around a little bit. But the value of this table is that it helps identify what are the most high-risk hazards. And that helps focus things like how you prioritize funding and how you prioritize activities and that sort of thing. So the lowest likelihood and lowest consequence are things like community intruders and tornadoes, food source interruptions, and lightning. These are things that don't happen very often, or if they do happen, they don't have a very, very severe impact. Now, when we move up into slightly higher consequence and likelihood, we get this yellow area here. And that's where we have things like snowstorms, which happen pretty frequently, but they don't have a huge impact. People are used to them. You have things like pandemics, epidemics, which have quite a high impact, but are less likely than things like snowstorms. And then in between, you have things like drought, human disease, high wind events, heat, animal disease, fuel source interruptions, hazardous material spills, water service interruptions, air quality, flooding, public health crisis or mental health crises, and public health service interruptions. And then on the highest end here, the highest risk, we have structure fires and wildfires. These are things that happen quite frequently, and they are the most likely to have a high impact or high consequence. And I think that what we've been hearing and what we've been seeing this year shows that the consequences of wildfire, there's a lot of potential consequences. There's displacement, there's smoke, health impacts, there's financial impacts, emotional impacts. So there's a lot of sort of cascading impacts from something like wildfire. All of these hazards their impacts are usually more than just one particular impact. They usually affect people and communities in multiple ways. There we go. So then we have identified out of those lists of hazards, what are the top 10?
Oh, Roger has a question.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Roger.
You said, does the impact of hazards affect the seasons?
So, seasons affect hazard impacts. So, for instance, wildfires impacts are higher when it's dry and when it's hot and when there's conditions that are conducive to ignition, like lightning or human-caused fires. That goes the same with things like lightning, tornadoes, snowstorms. A lot of these things are impacted by seasons. So seasons impact them, and seasons will make them more likely, and seasons will also make them higher impact. Some of these things, though, seasonality doesn't change quite as much. Let me see, like public health service interruption. That might be something that can happen at any time of year. Public health crisis, mental health crisis, that could happen at any time of year. Human disease. But, seasonality can still play a role. We haven't factored seasonality into this too much because we're looking sort of at more like a general year-round likelihood and consequence. So we're comparing these hazards across a year. But But when we think about consequences, we also think about impacts to the environment. So, for instance, wildfire not only impacts human health, human infrastructure, but it has the potential to negatively impact the forest. And so, when we do our consequence calculation, we consider what impacts there might be to the environment. We haven't gone so far to look at, what is the impact to the climate or, sort of broader environmental systems, but we think about it in terms of sort of local environment, that sort of thing. Does that help answer your question?
I can't see it yet.
Let me know Roger, if you have any follow up on that. So then back to these top 10 hazards. These are the same hazards from the previous table, but now we've just organized the top 10 based on their scores. And there are actually more hazards than what we showed here. We just wanted to simplify it a little bit for presentation and focus on the top ones. When we produce our final regional and community profiles, we will include all of the hazards. But we wanted to focus on the top 10 in order to hear your thoughts and feedback on them. When we put this together, fire season hadn't quite started yet, but it seems to us a bit of a confirmation that we identified wildfire and now we have this wildfire situation. We also identified structural fires, pandemic, human disease, air quality, which is tied to wildfire. So like I said, a lot of these things are connected. They're hard to consider completely separately. Public health services interruptions, nurse and doctor shortages, or lack of ambulances, or if nursing stations are closed, anything that might interrupt those services. Public health crises, these are obviously tied to those public health service interruptions, but could also include things like sort of the spin-off effects, like when people go into a mental health crisis based on traumatic losses in the community. Public health crisis could even be connected with a wildfire. We've heard through our research that evacuations can be traumatic when families are separated or where they have to go to places that they're not comfortable with. So public health crisis can be it's a pretty broad category. Flooding is not applicable to all of the communities, but it is applicable in the region. And we are really interested in hearing more about how flooding impacts communities. And we know that there's really two types of flooding. There is natural flooding events, so when there's a lot of snow melt or a lot of rain upriver, but there's also human-caused flooding events. And we know that, especially on like the Nelson River, hydro dams have created flooding, and those are things that matter to a lot of the communities. High wind event. This is a little bit different than, I'm not sure if we captured tornadoes in this. Tornadoes are somewhat rare in the MKO region, but high wind is pretty frequent and they can be damaging and dangerous. And drought, which again is connected with wildfire. So I'm going to expand a little bit now on vulnerabilities. Alex touched on this earlier. These vulnerabilities, what they do is they increase the likelihood, or they increase the potential impacts of a hazard. So there's two general types of vulnerabilities. There are socioeconomic vulnerabilities and there are infrastructure and environmental vulnerabilities. So these might be things like health conditions and mobility constraints. One way that relates to the current situation is during evacuation, people who have mobility constraints will find it harder to evacuate, or people with health conditions might be more severely impacted by wildfire smoke. So these are important things to consider when we're thinking about hazards and how we mitigate them. Seniors and youth, houseless people, important land use areas that are at higher risk. We've heard trap lines are of high value in a lot of northern communities, and they're also, they have a lot of exposure to things like wildfires. And then there's cultural language barriers. These are all things that can exacerbate or make the impacts worse when a hazard occurs. And then there are infrastructure and environmental vulnerabilities. Infrastructure can be things like overcrowding, poor maintenance or disrepair of structures. Lack of building codes can make structures more vulnerable. Limited critical services, sort of like what we're talking about with Trudy. When there are gaps or gaps in capacity of critical services, that is a vulnerability that could make a hazard more dangerous. Road access is something we need to consider. And then existing damaged ecosystems. For instance, land that's already been flooded, or land that's already been burned by wildfire. And structures built in hazardous areas. These are all factors that apply pretty generally, and which we're interested in learning more about for the specific MKO communities. We also think about risk drivers, which are close to things like vulnerabilities. They influence risk level by increasing exposure and by increasing vulnerability. So these things are sort of layered on top of each other. You might have a risk, you might have a hazard, vulnerabilities might increase your exposure and impact. Risk drivers will increase your vulnerabilities even more. So climate change is a risk driver. Land use planning and development that doesn't consider hazards. Old or poorly maintained infrastructure, remote communities, and poverty and social inequality. These are things that are more challenging to address when we think about emergency management, but they all influence and play a role in how a hazard might turn into a disaster. So, given all that, hazards, vulnerabilities, risk drivers, what can be done? When we think about emergency management, there are 4 to 5 pillars. Some people call them 4 pillars, some people call them 5 pillars. We've broken them out into 5. Prevention and mitigation are sometimes grouped together as one. So prevention and mitigation, that's what do you do before an event? How do you prevent a hazard from happening? And how do you mitigate or lower the potential impact of a hazard when it occurs? So some things like that might be, I think Trudy mentioned education for people about, fire response or fire safety, preventing hazards from occurring, at least the hazards that can be prevented. Mitigating would be how do you lower the potential impact of a hazard once it has already started? So if there is a fire, how do you make sure that it's less likely to burn important things in and around the community? Preparedness is often very heavily tied with planning. So when a hazard is imminent or when it's happening, how much has been done to prepare leadership and community members to deal with that hazard. So preparedness can be community emergency plans. It can be personal emergency plans. Preparedness can be risk assessments. It might also be preparing resources, so training, equipment, getting things ready so that when a hazard occurs, the proper organizations and people are ready to respond. And that brings us to the fourth pillar, response. That's dealing with a hazard as it's happening. So obviously that's things like firefighting, things like healthcare, evacuation. These things are all need to be prepared for in order to work well, and then they need to be practiced so that when it's happening, people know what to do. And lastly, there's recovery. So after the hazard has stopped, after it's over, what do you need to do to get people back home, to rebuild, to provide people with support, whether that's financial, emotional, healthcare? How do you recover from a hazard? So we've looked at some national strategies, which we have listed here, and we have familiarity with some local strategies, and we're really curious about learning what communities have in place currently for their risk reduction strategies, so that we can identify where are the gaps, what can be done to help the MKO member communities be more resilient to a hazard. And one thing I don't know if we covered in our definitions, but there's a difference between a hazard and a disaster. There's even a difference between an emergency and a disaster, where a natural hazard, like say wildfire, isn't always a disaster, especially if all these levels of emergency management are prepared for, are planned and ready. And a disaster occurs when that hazard starts negatively impacting people. And when the planning and the preparedness and the response are not adequate to deal with it. And a disaster occurs when the hazard sort of overwhelms your capacity and resources. And so that's really what we want to, that's a big part of what we're trying to help with here is we're never going to completely eliminate hazards, but how do you prevent a hazard from becoming a disaster? So here's some example. Oh, Trudy, I think you had a comment.
Yeah, just a quick comment. When you do, one thing with us is we had just the Friday before the evacuation on the 27th in Cross Lake, we had got together and did a community meeting, and are we ready? So those readiness preparation meetings are important, along with possible scenario plays. Because say with one area of your community you need to evacuate, we need to register those people, right? When Cross Lake evacuated, they didn't have, last minute, they had to get out of the community. There was no registration, so there was no triaging. So those steps have to be identified to the communities. It's not, people say, it's common sense. It's really not common sense. It's a lot of technical work and commitment. Just to add, sorry.
No, thank you, Trudy. That's really important. I'm glad you shared that. That's a real world recent example of the importance of these pillars of emergency management. And it's typically, that's what's recommended in any kind of emergency management plan. Often, and this is not, I'm not even just speaking about First Nations, but municipalities, towns, cities, Often emergency management plans get built, they get written, they get printed, and then they get filed. And unless you're reviewing and updating and practicing, they're not useful. And in an emergency or emergency situation, things happen so quickly and people are thinking about so many different things that even if it seems like common sense, it can be very easy to forget or to rush and to miss things, when you're in that chaotic moment of dealing with an emergency.
Right. And then relief efforts for those staffing that are there because, a 16 to 8 hour day is not normal for a lot of people. So you have to have other people, you have to help them identify who can take those places. Now you look at what's happening in, now that we triage them to Winnipeg, our staff there to help aid those people. And then, following along with the ones that have, your priority ones, priority twos, threes, four, five, whatever. And then going back home again. So there's a whole lot of work that's needed into that book of your emergency preparedness plan. Like we're so lucky to have people on our end that are able to work and commit their time and effort. I was worried about the food. People here, they were looking after feeding everybody. You have to have an emergency fund. We can't rely on Red Cross, sorry to say. We had no beds for a lot of these people that are sleeping on the cement floor in the arena. Cement floor at the school. No blankets, no hygiene, nothing. So, there's a lot of unknowns that we have to consider. The bedding didn't come in till maybe I think the third or fourth day.
Wow.
Yeah.
And where was that in Norway House or was that in Winnipeg?
Norway House.
In Norway House.
I'm curious too, when you say there were people committed to helping, were a lot of those people volunteers in Norway House or who were they?
Staff. We have staff.
Staff.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
like Norway House Cree Nation has say 900 staff. So then we have to, what we do in our community is we set up who's on your emergency measures team and downsizing who's going to be responsible, like say the arena maintenance or the arena manager becomes the facilities manager. So she's able to every facility like the schools, what can they do and what can they provide? What's in there? What assets do they have? And then who's going to monitor security and well-being, right? So health services, social services, emergency people, personnel, transportation. Like all these people came here, we have a ferry. It was one of the issues that we had were the fact that we couldn't cross that ferry fast enough.
Yeah.
The fire was, there was a extensive lineup. Yeah. After all of this is done, and Cross Lake goes back home and Flin Flon and Snow Lake, and it'll be good to know, to evaluate every part, what went wrong or what wasn't there. And then you'll know where our gaps are in our province. I know one of the biggest ones is equipment. Nothing to fight a fire. In our homes, you take just the home alone on smoke detection and access to fire extinguisher is an issue, and breathing and air quality, the total number of people in the home. Like I'm telling you, there was 8,600 people in the community and we have 1,400 homes. There's overcrowding. And then you have to move all those people. So just all the kind of factors have to play its part.
That to me sounds like, vulnerabilities. There are clear vulnerabilities there with with overcrowding and lack of equipment, or even like the capacity of the ferry, it makes it difficult to deal with like when there's a wildfire. Suddenly, the consequences become more severe because there's capacity lacking and there's vulnerabilities there.
Yeah, so then it goes into infrastructure. Like if we ran into a winter storm, what facilities do you have that have what do you call that? A generator. And how long does that generator last? And has that generator been maintained? You know, those kind of like these are cost factors that we do in our community. And you know, with the arena and the state that it's in and the age that it's in, we had to do upgrades. And these are long-term plans that we need to really consider. We have a small generator here in our policing unit because of the fact that, you know, we have to provide that 24-hour emergency response. And then the new health center has that capacity for so many people, though, and for 3 days, I believe. And the multiplex runs on diesel fuel. Those kind of things, you know, are you know, things that our community is doing. But then you look at some communities that are more isolated that don't have access is very concerning.
Mm. Thanks for sharing that, Trudy. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add? Well, I'll move on here. But yeah, just that's really great to hear, Trudy. That's really important information for us. And you know, we're really that's a big part of why we're doing our field visits. We'll speak to that a little bit more again after I'm finished with this presentation. But moving back here to the risk reduction strategies, these are sort of broad themes or categories of strategies that can help with mitigating impacts, that can help with you know, lowering the consequences of a hazard. So prioritization and equity. This ensures the adaptation efforts or mitigation efforts maximize benefits towards people's well-being, followed by benefits to the natural environment and the economy. So this is making sure that the people who need the help and the places that need the help are getting it. Infrastructure and planning. So this can help improve post-disaster recovery efforts by rebuilding infrastructure to better withstand future disasters. It helps with it can involve adopting building codes to address vulnerabilities to hazard events and invest in mitigation activities to address all types of hazards. Emergency management coordination can involve empowering Indigenous people to integrate traditional knowledge, awareness, and education into emergency management planning. So that can make things more relevant for people. You know, we don't want to just apply emergency management plans and coordination that work in southern Manitoba because it might not be relevant for people in the MKO communities. It might also include developing coordinated emergency management approaches across jurisdictions. So examples are between Cross Lake and Norway House. It makes sense for some of these neighboring communities to have coordinated emergency management plans. And it can also involve enhancing the capacity of First Nations community to effectively respond to emergencies. So, you know, like we've been talking about, training, resources, funding. Risk reduction strategies should also focus on knowledge and awareness, increasing public awareness of hazards like wildfires, floods, and other events, and teaching people how to respond effectively. This can include things like better communication, better forecasts, and alerts that everyone in the community has access to. It might also include conducting public emergency response training, hazard awareness campaigns, and education programs in your communities. These might be community-wide, or they could be things that take place in schools. And lastly on our list here is data monitoring. So data monitoring supports the development of databases for fire incidents in First Nation communities. This can help inform things like strategies. An example is wildfire. If you're keeping track of where wildfires are starting and when they're starting, it can help with pre-positioning resources. You know, if you know that wildfires are going to start in the spring and start along roads, then that might be a place to patrol, or that might be a place to do some sort of mitigation work. Monitoring and the collection of data provides information that can help inform strategies. Is that the last one?
I think it might be.
Maybe I'm just not.
No, that's the last one.
Okay. Stop sharing my screen now. So that is the end of our formal presentations. We are ahead of schedule. I'm sure people are not disappointed about that. Are there any thoughts or comments?
I'll say something. Thank you for this opportunity, especially at this time. You know, there's so much growth that's needed in our communities, so much capacity building. You know, when we took the incident commander training and I was talking to the instructor, it was really concerning me that there was only, I think he said 3 instructors in the province. We're losing interest in people in these capacities to train our communities. You know, that's coming from the office of the fire commissioner, but then it's, you know, when I first looked at all of this, I wondered who's responsible for fire in First Nations. I know that we used to have the Manitoba, what is it called, MANF, and what happened after that, and who's advocating for us. You know, MKO. I'm glad MKO is doing what they're doing. But then you come down to the province, like, and even the federal government, like who's really responsible for our communities. And when it comes to consulting services, they come with high prices. And I think that those high costs should be really advocated, addressed provincially and federally, because, you know, there's communities out there that have no chance in economic development. And, you know, our priority there, you know, we fit the bill for First Nations Safety Officer program and our fire department, and it was a priority the past couple of years with our chief. But that's, you know, I'll tell you that the first year that I started, we were at a 6 point some million dollar deficit in this capacity alone. And this year it was 4.5, but it's just that none of this is really paid attention to. And, you know, we're lucky to be one of the more successful communities, but you look at the little ones that even municipals, they're not properly serviced or supported. I see these nice little fire departments when you go down, you know, hit like say Moosehorn and Ashern. And I went through Stonewall, and I'm like, wow, these places are, you know, very, you know, lucky and fortunate. But then, like, who's training them, and we're 2 years now, we've been trying to get training through the initial attack through, what was sustainable development to the Department of Natural Resources. I don't know what they're called now, but
Yeah.
that training alone is, we can't get anybody to do the training here because they're too focused on what they have to do for the province and their wildland protection. And we need that, and if we can't get the training and we don't meet the demands of Indigenous Services Canada because they're tier funded, and at the beginning, like, you don't even have somebody that's trained to start it off or even to write a proposal.
Mhm.
I'm a writer. I'm a writer. I'm a project manager. I'm able to do that, but there's a lot of communities that don't even have that capacity at all. So hoping that MKO puts in that, for every community, and we'll meet a bigger outcome. Thank you, guys.
Well, yeah, thanks, Trudy. I mean, I think that's a good point. And even yourself, it sounds like there's a lot to deal with in our house emergency management. And even though you seem very capable of, you're aware of the issues and you can write grants, it's still a lot. It's a lot for one person to be doing all of that. I know that's part of why MKO wants to do this work, and that's why we are here too. We want to provide the services that, the grant writing services and the planning services. There is a challenge in that it sounds like ISC sustaining funding is quite limited, like you described, for your fire department, for instance. And the federal government does provide quite a bit of funding in the form of grants, but it's often limited to 1 or 2 years and specific projects. So it is a challenge. We recognize that. We're really hoping that this work can help move that needle forward a little bit for everyone.
And that is something also you mentioned, with the grant writing, that at Intergroup we're trying to help with, like some communities or some organizations we've been working with, we've been doing the grant writing pro bono so that people at least get access to the money. And then of course, like, we want to be part of that project. So that's kind of ultimately how we would get paid. But it is totally wacko, some of these hoops that you need to jump through to get funding that is just necessary, and we feel that frustration, obviously not as keenly as you do, but we totally get it. And there are some little ways we're trying, at least like us here at this firm, we're trying to help a little bit with jumping through those hoops.
Yeah, one thing that comes to my mind is the ISC Fire Smart funding. I've put in quite a few proposals for that for communities, and we've been pretty good at getting them. But because they follow the fiscal year, the funding often gets approved by end of April or May, and by then fire season has started already. And a lot of this work needs to be done before fire season has started. So even when there is funding available, it can be a challenge.
Yeah, and I think that one thing for sure is that the funding sources should actually consider that every community or every area should have at least a fire prevention officer in it, because like you said, like, I'm doing this in this capacity, but we don't have an identified person in that capacity just focused on fire. And I think that if they did, then at least that salary would be met, and there's somebody that's able to focus specifically to emergency management in this capacity for fire risk management and all this other wonderful stuff within this area. Because right now I feel like, my head is just going crazy, and I'm relying on other entities in the community. Our emergency measures manager, she's busy. She's supposed to be in this training today, and then she messaged me asking me where I was and if I could just attend. And I'm glad I did. But you know, there's 3 of them that are in that capacity. They all have a different job though, and they're only
Yeah.
enacted when there's an emergency. But if you had a fire prevention officer in this capacity, they'd be able to focus on it 110%, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think the last thing is the second one.
We'll do the second one.
Yeah.
You want me to pull? So why don't we pull up the website and just do, maybe just look through, we can share the remaining tabs there.
Okay.
So that everyone knows what they can find and where.
Okay, so just back to the website before we close. So at the very bottom, there's contact info for us, the links to the workbooks, although I will email you out probably later today to let you know when they've been revised. Project details are at the top here. So that's got some slides from the morning presentation with the objectives, timeline, and the methods. We also have our July field visit calendar here. Here we go. So again, this is tentative, but this is what we have either faxed or emailed out to all of you. So the plan as it stands is to have that first week of July, we'll be traveling up to the PA and be kind of based out of there and doing road trips to obviously we'll be in Pasqueac, Chemehuewan, Mississippiwistic, Wesquisipic, and Sabatoyak all on that one day. But that's because we have 2 different teams. So we plan to be in each community for 4-ish hours, traveling around in a vehicle with hopefully the kind of emergency management coordinator or whoever's kind of holding that role in that location. And then on Friday, we'd be going to Mosakahikan and Kichiwapa. And then, so that's kind of like our West Side tour. And then the following week, we will be doing some of our, some flying communities and some driving. So Craig will be going to York on the Monday. I think you said that you were available for that. And then, as you can see, some of the other communities we're going to, Trudy will be in Norway House on the 8th. And then we have a week off, although I imagine that week in the PA, I can see that potentially moving down, just with a lot of those communities being evacuated. And then that last week of July is again pretty much, I think those are all flying communities going up north and then over to the east, and I guess also west with Matthias Kolom and Pipino. And yeah, so we are very much looking forward to this trip. What an opportunity for us. When else do we get to go to so many different nations? So keep your date in mind. If you foresee any issues with that date, other than the obvious, as in fires and evacuations, but if you foresee anything like, oh, I'm going to be out of town, or we have something big in the community that weekend, let us know. We have booked all of our flights and everything, but if it's not possible, obviously we will try and figure something else out. And if you personally aren't available, but there is someone else we could meet, please let us know that. So just like I said, we've already got our flights booked and that kind of thing. So,
And I'll just add, Alex mentioned that we have 2 teams going each week. But we still have pretty limited time in each community. We would love to spend a day or more in each community, talking about everything and seeing everything. But there's also 26 communities. often these all hazard and risk assessments for one community takes an entire year. And we're trying to do 26 communities in 1 year. So we have to be very efficient. So I apologize in advance that we're doing such a short visit. We have like sort of a plan to try to like see all the relevant critical infrastructure while we're there. We're really hoping that the workbooks you fill out and any follow-up conversations will help prepare us for our visits. It's unfortunate we couldn't have this conference in Thompson because we had more planned, like some mapping and things like that would give us some more of that early information. That all being said, this is our current plan. We can and will revise it if we can't get it to every community. We might have to move some of these visits to maybe September if that's the case, just based on other projects we have going on. But we're really pushing to try to get as much of this done in July as we can, with the understanding that, you know, we're really at the mercy of the weather and the fires at this point.
Yes. And then the last, I mentioned that we've got definitions there, and then on this initial findings page, you can see some of the slides that Curtis went through in the afternoon presentation. So those preliminary hazards and risk ratings, the top hazards in the MKO region, some of the vulnerabilities we discussed, and then some of those risk drivers and risk reduction strategies. So keep this website bookmarked. If you need help accessing it, just give me a shout. It's just that password June 2025 with a capital J. And yes, and I will email you when the workbooks have been revised. I'll email you both the digital link and also the printable versions. And I think that's it for us. Is that possible? Have we done it all? Okay. So yes, if you have any more questions or insights now, like please lay it on us. Or else we're always happy to have a chat later. Whether that's by phone or by email.
You know, I'm really appreciative of what you've been able to share, Trudy and everyone else who's shared. We were really looking forward to this conference in Thompson because not only do we have these presentations to share, but I think there's a really great opportunity here for the communities to learn from each other's experiences, and even what you've shared already has been very informative for us, at the very least.
Yeah, the risk management assessment should actually be broken down within the community to the schools, to the hospitals, to the clinics. You know, I know it's a lot to ask. You're only here for 1 day, but then if you get a good picture, you do your homework before you get here. We do our pre-meeting, then you'll have something to know before you come, because we do risk management with Frontier School Division, and it's a great opportunity, and more of our community members should take the training. But it's because it comes down to very different aspects of risk management and risk hazards. And I think that we need long-term training in our communities. At least that training is, I think it was 1 full day or 2, but it's something that's definitely needed to really come in and lead community discussions.
Mm.
Yeah.
But we're hoping that this work sort of leads to, like, we're hoping that we can do follow-up work after, like, this all hazard and risk assessment is pretty high level, and you know, where it's giving us a broad picture of MKO's member communities. We're really hoping that follow-up work, whether it's with MKO or whether it's with specific communities, start digging into some of these things that you've suggested, Trudy. Like there's a lot to do, and there's a lot of communities. So we're really hoping that we can help support that in whatever way, and at the very least, get things started with this work.
Yes, definitely. I think that MKO too can do. I don't want to tell everybody what to do, but like doing an asset map alone and knowing what assets are in the communities is a definite start, because we don't know, like those basic questions on infrastructure, and then knowing exactly what they are. That's good, because then you have a starting point. Then who is in that facility and who is in that community that has all these different skills? Like for myself, being a firefighter, EMR, recreation, project management, and and being well connected to the community. I know everybody here. I know what they're capable of, and you need that team leader there to say, you're going to be the incident commander then, right, Craig? Craig was our incident commander when we were sitting there, and because he could multitask and multi-think, and he's open, and you have to have somebody that's complex, that's able to really look at and scope the whole community at once. Exciting plans.
Yeah. Yeah, that's important. And it's like it's exciting to think of what could be, right? Like you said, if you had this asset map, what could that lead to? And the list that we had in the workbook of the critical infrastructure, like Curtis had mentioned, if the conference was in person, there was a map attached to that of each community, and then you could show just right on the map where all those critical infrastructure pieces were. But that's also why we are coming to do that.
But you know what? Can you even send that so then we can do our homework before you come and give it some
Sure,
thought?
yeah. Mhm.
That'd be
I
great.
think we have it. We should be able to provide it in the digital, like in the PDF, and then you can always scan it and send it back to us.
Yeah.
And then our plan too is when we visit, we're going to be coming with tablets that we can fill out information on and then put a GPS coordinate in so that we get the coordinate of where that particular piece of infrastructure is.
Good. Nice.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll do what we can in 4 hours, 4-ish hours. But obviously, Norway House is one of the bigger ones, and that might take.
We've budgeted more time for you, don't worry.
Yeah, we've budgeted more time for you. Some of the smaller communities, 4 hours might be good, but we know Norway. We've been there. We know that it's a bit bigger.
Yeah, we've got more time for like Norway House, OCN, and a few other ones. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Should we wrap it?
I think we'll wrap it up. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I mean, we really appreciate you being here. We know you have so many other things to do, and other demands on your time. So really appreciate you making the time. And we will keep you obviously in the loop with the July visits. And if any changes happen to those, of course, you'll be the first to know. And if you have any questions, truly give us a shout anytime. We're more than happy to hear from you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
take care,
Have a nice
guys.
day.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good one.